Hello and welcome to this special author interview for the SFF Spotlight event. I'm Frasier Armitage, your host, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday and Time's Ellipse. And joining me today is this fantastic fantasy author whose Kickstarter has recently been successful and it's absolutely awesome. He's the author of Hall of Bones. He's got loads of cool stuff on the way. It's Tim Hardie. Tim, how you doing?
Hello, that's a hell of a build-up, Fraser. If I can live up to it.
Oh, you totally can. We've chatted before, Tim. That is not build up enough. You need
All right,
more.
fair enough. Carry on.
I want fireworks coming out. I'm gonna see if Holly can edit fireworks into this. But
Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
fireworks kind of guy. Actually, you're right. I need to own this more. more.
no pressure for the actual event. When on your first panel, if like the nerdy cafe goes up in absolute flames because of the fireworks that have been installed, that would be like,
Yeah. I mean,
what a
that's
day.
what Holly's after, isn't it? She wants the venue to literally burn to the ground. That's what we're after.
Yeah, well, it'd be memorable then, wouldn't it? It'd be like, first in history, like every event to be stopped by fire. How cool would that be? Anybody who's thinking of attending, please don't take that
No,
seriously.
please
Don't
don't.
try it.
That's,
Yeah,
no,
please don't.
we're only joking. We're only joking.
Yeah.
Nothing flammable. Okay.
So, how are you feeling about being part of this event? It's happening in September 29th at the Nerdy Cafe in Shrewsbury. How does it feel to be a part of the event?
Really, really exciting. I feel woefully unprepared, I think it's fair to say. But we're sort of recording this at the beginning of August, and the event's actually happening right at the tail end of September. So there's plenty of time to kind of get geared up for it. But I'm looking forward to it. It's an absolutely packed day as well, which I think is going to be. I thought this would be quite a small affair with maybe a couple of panels and a few tables and stuff, but it's absolutely rammed, isn't it, with so many different things going on.
Have you been to these kinds of events before, Tim?
Not really, no. It's trying to think. I've done Bristol Con a couple of years ago. I would have been there last year, but I got rained off in the storm that swept over the UK. So this is, and by the time we actually get to the Shrewsbury event, I will have been to Worldcon. So this could kind of be my third author mingling affair, basically, kind of thing in real life, because obviously a lot of this stuff happens, doesn't it, online generally. But so this would be basically my third event.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're going to go from Worldcon, which is like the biggest of the big,
Yeah.
to this event, which is so intimate and so personal and so lovely. It's like two completely different experiences. It'll be so good to see what you make to both. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah. I think Worldcon, it's kind of intimidating on its scale almost, and I must admit I'm finding I had a slight panic attack when I opened the opened the program and just saw how much was in there. So I do, but I think the Shrewsbury event's going to be a lot easier to navigate. You'll be in one building, very easy to find what's going on and what's happening. So I think it'd be a slightly more relaxed affair, put it that way.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you missed Tim at Worldcon and you want to catch up with him as an author, then just come along to this event and you'll be able to do so. And same goes for me as well. So if you want to come along, it'd be great to see you.
Yeah.
And in terms of what you're bringing to the party, Tim, you're on some panels through the event. Is that right?
Yeah. So Holly crowbarred me into a few different situations, and I'm sure none of us will regret this later. So I'm on a panel just looking at, basically recommending reads and how to get into the writing community and reading community more generally. So that should be quite good fun. I'm a book reviewer for Page Chewing as well, so I do like books, obviously, and I like I like reviewing them. I enjoy sort of like thinking about what I liked about a story and what I didn't. It's kind of a chance to sort of like share that knowledge a bit more in a sort of panel format. Some of the stuff that's really stood out to me over the last year or two, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm on like a panel for that, and then I'm also running a workshop as part of the event as well, where I'm going to need to bring up the website details to remind myself of the title of this because I keep forgetting it. But it is Plotting Your Storyline with Tim Hardie, which sounds very, very official. I don't quite know why Holly's just selected me for this panel without wishing to not big myself up, but I'm based, as we'll probably talk about a bit later on, I've written a trilogy of 4 books. So if anyone knows anything about plotting, I'm not sure it's actually me, but I'm going to lean into the fact that we learn from our mistakes more than we learn from our successes. So yeah, we're running a 45-minute workshop for aspiring writers. People may be learning some of those basics and things. Going to try and pull that together for a quick workshop session as well during the event.
Yeah, fantastic. I always think that a trilogy is better when there's 4 rather than 3. I think it's the perfect number for a trilogy. I think it's great.
Yeah. The key thing, this is a slight spoiler, but my main recommendation when you write the first book, do not put the word trilogy in the title unless you're really sure that you're going to get over the line with that. So you'll notice that when I put my first book out, it simply said book 1. And, I think I was proved right to hedge my bets on that one.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think as well, like with particularly when you're spreading across a series, it's so important, isn't it, to have the plotting in place, because there are so many things that you raise in book 1 that by the time you finish it off and then you read it back, you're like, oh, I completely forgot about that strand, but 3 books ago. It's like, so yeah, it's for fantasy especially, it's a big thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really the challenge, isn't it? Because I think when you're starting that series, you're throwing ideas at it, and the fun is that you just add more and more ingredients to the pot. But that's basically what happened to me at the 3rd book. I realised unless it was, 1,000 pages long, I couldn't bring all those storylines to a sensible fruition unless I killed everybody in like a terrible longship accident. Half the cast just vanish, and that they're all dead. That's it. That was the only way it would have worked, would be just to simply annihilate the cast, and no, that didn't feel right. So yeah, I think you've got to really, writing that first book is much harder to close out a series when you get to the end. So definitely learning as I'm going along with this, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I guess anybody who attends who's got the idea of wanting to write in the fantasy sphere and they're thinking, yeah, I've got this idea of this epic trilogy, not quite sure how it's going to end, I guess those are the ones who'd really benefit from the workshop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, you need to know plotting even for like a single volume, standalones. I've written both, and in some respects, actually, it's just as important. With a standalone, you've got to obviously tell a complete story and wrap it in a single tale. Whereas you can leave a lot more open in a series. It's all a question, though, about understanding, as you lay that framework down, with a series, you've got to then understand, well, actually, that's going to, every building block you put in place has got to have a function at the end of that series. And that's what, that's where the challenge comes, really, because you end up with much more material to sort out. That's the basic issue.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's going to be fascinating hearing what you've got to teach us, Tim. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it myself. It'll be really
fun.
I
must confess, I must start preparing for this beyond what I've just said, because that doesn't. I've just looked at the time. That hasn't taken 45 minutes, has it? So gonna have to seriously start thinking about a few extra bits to that. But that's the basic message.
Yeah, there'll be more in store. That'll be really good for everybody who gets there. Your first book, because you mentioned about book 1, it's Hall of Bones, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, because the last time that we spoke together, it was about your Kickstarter for the audiobook for Hall of Bones, which got funded, which I'm really pleased about. Yes. How is all of that going?
It's a lot of work, I've got to say. I thought a Kickstarter was a lot of work, and I think you were doing like a therapy session, weren't you, at the time, to sort of try and cope with it. But actually, then when you get into fulfillment, that's another level. Again, so yeah, going really well, working with RJ Bailey, who's doing the narration for me. And we've kind of done a bit of a dry run. So we did one of the rewards that came out of the Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter, as you said, is to fund the full audiobook version of Hall of Bones. So that will get the full treatment later on this year, probably around November time, hoping to get that out for Kickstarter supporters. But as part of the package of rewards, we also had a short story collection that was being sort of put together, and people could basically pay for that if they wanted, rather than going for the full book, or they could have both. So we've now done a roll of the dice. That's basically been recorded. It's with a distributor now, so I'm working through a company called Audiobook Empire, and they're sort of handling that side for me. So it's now basically ready as an ebook, ready for pre-order. And then in the background, it's also getting set up. So from the 23rd of August, when the ebook becomes available, You can also pick up the audiobook as well, and that's going wide. So basically, any outlet that sells audiobooks, you can basically pick it up at your preferred outlet of choice. So, but yeah, so that was good fun because it was. I always said at the time I wanted something new to come out of the Kickstarter, as well as just getting the main book recorded. So that it's been really interesting. Sort of like it's only 4 short stories, and it's only about it's about 38 pages. It's really like a coffee break read, if anything, rather than like a huge tome. But even just doing that, the amount of work to get RJ right with all the characters, getting the accents and regional variations and stuff right. It's been a really good, I think, test bed for how we're going to have to approach the full novel when we get there. And I must confess, it's exceeded my expectations. The audiobook version of that short story collection, it really has.
That's awesome to hear. I know that when we talked last, you are such a big fan of RJ and his voice and what he brings to the characters and things. What's it been like getting to work with RJ on the Roll of the Dice?
Yeah, it's been good. He's a pro, which obviously really really helps. Very patient, because part of the problem is you don't know what you don't know until you start doing it. So that's been sort of just trying to feel your way through. How do you communicate? How do you sort of like provide the information he needs to actually form his own mental picture of who the characters are? So you end up having to basically write a bio for each of them. But I like my characters, so there's still about 30 odd in about 38 pages. So I've still gone a bit crazy. But yeah, it's things like so Etta, for example, is a key character in the series, in the whole about Brotherhood of the Eagle series. So it's really interesting, like hearing how he approaches her voice and sort of say, she's not just an old woman, so he's got to kind of bring something a bit different to that, but still communicate as a character of a certain age and so on. So it's kind of like melding, writing, acting, and just getting that consistent voice down. So yeah, sort of hearing how the characters were sort of, I guess I always hear them speak in my head as I'm writing it, but RJ is kind of overwriting that now with what he's doing. So now I hear Etta as RJ's interpretation of that, and again, some of the other characters are also appearing in this. So you've got Ulfar and his crew, which is part of the early, the foundations of the Brotherhood of the Eagle rebellion, basically. So getting a little bit of a chance to sort of play into his backstory and what his crew was like before they actually joined Johan, for example. So again, I gave him quite a bit of work to do, even over quite a few short pages, but it feels real when he kind of like comes back. It's really, for me, it's really, really immersive. So I'm enjoying the process, put it that way.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I love that collaboration. I know with when I've experienced it in an audio drama that got put together out of a script that I'd written, and what the actors brought about the character were things that I hadn't particularly necessarily spent time imagining. Has that been sort of true of you, that you've been with these characters for ages, but like, is that something that you've learned? Have you learned about the characters because of RJ?
Yeah, it's just sort of like, you kind of got to give RJ a lot of freedom with this, because I can't simply say, this person speaks in this way, because if I was that dictatorial about it, I'd probably have to record it myself. So it's actually more, you give him like the most very, very basic details. So basically, the name of the character, roughly where they're from, which clan they belong to, age, social standing is quite important to help him pitch the accent right, and then you sort of like to say, over to you. So it's more like, I suppose it's more his interpretation of those few bits of information, plus obviously what's on the page of the story as well. So it's it's my work, but it's someone's interpretation of my work, if that makes sense. And you're right, they kind of just, it's not necessarily what you're expecting, but that's kind of part of the fun, isn't it? That's somebody else's interpretation of your creation, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you like a level of objectivity that you don't get anywhere else. It's really cool.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you've had that.
Can't wait, actually. It's no, so I mean that's in the bag. We're just getting that released, and then I've got some editing work I'm doing sort of for the main writing of the series. I'm finishing that off at the moment. Then once that editing's done, I'm basically going to sort of work things back up again, and hopefully by September, I'm hoping to be working with RJ on starting again that process again of character pen portraits, get that down and start to get the key characters, some test voices done for them, and start to build that up, really.
Oh, I'm so glad that you've got that in the pipeline and you've got all of
Yeah.
that to come. That's really good. Yeah. These 30 bios and everything, you should just make that part of Roll of the Dice as like a little extra. That'd be great for 38 pages and then 30 character bios. You could just do little trading cards or things. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm terrible at that side of this business. I think I can write, but you're right. It's coming up with these other ideas for sort of how to get people, get people to notice it. So who knows? That might be that might be the start of something right there.
Yeah, that's perfect. So when everyone's there in a couple of years' time with their trading cards, they'll be able to watch this video and then trace the genesis of it. That'd be great.
That was us. We did that. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about A Roll of the Dice, because I know that you've got this trilogy of 4 books, so you have got massive worlds that you've written, and you've in fantasy, that's generally the case, isn't it? You're writing to these long form approaches. But Roll of the Dice, 38 pages, 4 stories, fantasy. What's it been like writing short fantasy compared to your 4 books?
Yeah, it was a real challenge actually, because I do short fiction anyway. So I do that as part. I've been in a couple of anthologies where the word count has been, I think, 6,000 to 10,000 words, and I do short stories on that you get through my newsletter. Basically, I'm writing a novel in a sort of episodic form, which is called The Wolf Throne. So that started a short story project that, again, because of terrible plotting, got completely out of control, and it says actually this is a novel. But those stories range from about 10,000 words. I think the shortest is probably I think it might be about 3,000, something like that. But I just write them, and I don't set a limit on it. It's just when the story's done, it's done, and it could be, so the length may vary. It's not like writing a chapter that they're complete story. Every chapter, if you like, or every episode is a complete story. Because this was a Kickstarter freebie and I needed the money to basically pay for Hall of Bones, we had what I call a commercial artistic agreement that had to come together, that basically these stories couldn't be more than 2,000 words, because effectively RJ was doing them as part of promotion effectively for the project. So it's the funding goes for Hall of Bones. This was an extra, which kind of limited me to 2,000 words per story. And that was quite challenging actually, because that's my typical chapter length, but you've got to go from basically situation, characters, the conflict in the tale basically, and through to resolution of that, all in 2,000 words. And that was hard to do, because you really got to sort of limit there can be no fat at all in that story. You've just simply got to tell the story and let the characters speak for themselves, but make sure they shut up when they get to about 1,900 words, because it's got to all end at that point. But yeah, it worked. We managed to get all 4 stories came in at around that length, and I'm very satisfied that they feel complete. But it's also quite nice that they're sort of different. So it's 4 different stories, different time periods. So some of it's kind of like the legends of old, and just sort of fleshing out kind of what happened to events that are referred to in the books. There's one story is basically how Etta, the crone, becomes the councillor of the Reevesburg clan. So there's a scene that's basically about how she sort of inserts herself into clan politics without taking no for an answer, basically. And then I've also got the final story is actually titled The Roll of the Dice. That's I suppose Ulfar's backstory, in that this is the crew he had before he actually got involved with Johan, but it's actually taken from the perspective of Patrick, who is a character that's in the series as well. And it's about how he integrates himself into Ulfar's company. And so you meet, I suppose you meet the original version of them, basically. And then through it all, everything takes place, that there's a link to a single location. So again, just to try and make it a bit more, because it's obviously, if they're independent short stories, they kind of, it can be difficult for them to sort of come together as a whole. So there's basically there's an inn that sort of keeps appearing in all of the stories, or a location that has references to early parts of the tales, but just kind of gives it a bit of shape as well. And I just had to sort of really control the ideas, let the characters do what they needed to do, and just make sure it was only what was necessary was on the page. So I suppose just editing to the max, I guess, was probably the approach.
Yeah, and also it's where your plotting skills will come into it as
Yeah,
well, because if you're not tightly plotting those stories, they are very quickly going to get out of hand, aren't they? It's
yeah,
yeah.
and limiting the characters as well. So you want, I suppose, not as many interactions as I would typically throw into like the main epic fantasy series. So some it's just a handful of people are involved, 2 or 3, just to provide the interaction. A roll of the dice is a bigger cast. There's about 9 named characters in that particular tale. But yeah, most of the time it's very small, character driven, just around 2 or 3 people and how they interact. Basically, that's what you need to get with that story. So they're not like epic, battle scenes that go on for 20,000 words. It's not that kind of collection.
Yeah, but I think character-centric fantasy is definitely having a moment right now, isn't it? More than epic fantasy, I would say. Like there's I think it's what people really, really enjoyed about sort of like the Game of Thrones era was how they managed to draw the characters out of the series as opposed to
Yeah,
it's not just the dragons, is it?
no,
Like
exactly.
I think that type of character fantasy sort of thing, when you're dwelling on that, I think it's a really, really good time to be releasing that kind of book, because that's what we all want to read right now. It's great.
Yeah, for me, it's always been about the characters. I mean, maybe to the maybe to the extreme, because I've always done, a bit like George R. Martin with their big cast list at the back and all the rest of it. That is kind of what I write. But for me, the characters are what kind of give the energy to the story. So I think I've said this before in other sort of recordings, but I think plot is basically what happens. So that what you experience a series of events through plot, but character is why it matters. And if you don't care about the characters and what's happening to them, that there is no magic with the writing. You've got to have both incident, but then also the impact for the character. And plot can be driven simply by 2 people having a conversation. It doesn't necessarily all have to be action either. So I've always tended to lean that way. An awful lot of my chapters, when I look at them, technically, it's 2 people talking from start to finish. And some other writers, their approach to that is totally different. That they're much more involved in shaping what are the events that are happening around the character, how's that character feeling. But for me, conversation, a good chat, has always been the bedrock, I think, of how all my stories have been constructed, actually.
Yeah, are you one of those people that sort of hears about a particular conversation or something and thinks, "Oh, I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear what they said in that"? Is that kind of where that comes from? Do you think?
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that. And obviously, with the fun of being the author is you can actually make sure that exactly. You can show the reader that sort of intimate thing. And obviously, the magic device I've got enables my character to actually literally be that eavesdropper, in a sort of literal sense in these books, because he can literally head hop and see what's going on with his enemies. There's risks to doing that, obviously, but yeah, it kind of like it sort of in some ways the whole sort of premise of the series is actually being a fly on the wall. It kind of is actually that.
Yeah, we're professional eavesdroppers. That's what we do as authors, isn't it?
Yeah,
We are the flies on the walls. I feel like everybody who has been tuning in and listening in to us talking about Roll of the Dice is gonna, by the time that this event comes round, is gonna have their copy of it, so they can come and tell you about how they feel about
yeah,
it and everything. Will you be taking copies there as well for anybody who hasn't had a chance to pick up their copy, or to have
yeah.
sort of received it yet?
So a roll of because it's so thin, I can't actually produce it as a physical book, which is the first time this has ever happened. So a roll of the dice is only ebook, and it's only going to be audiobook version. Although having said that, what I'm trying to do, if I can get remotely organised, is I'm going to have links. So people, if they're talking to me and want to find out a bit more about what I produce, and have a bit of physical stock with me, but I'll also be trying to provide some links so people can go straight to their book if they want to do that. So yeah, Roll of the Dice is basically a digital story. But the
Yeah.
others, yeah, it's I will be taking basically everything I've produced up until now will be going in the car boot up to Shrewsbury. So I'm experimenting with tabletop sales for the first time. So I'll be busy with the event, but in the downtime, I'm going to be probably just manning a table for and seeing if so people have the chance to sort of like get signed copies, that kind of thing. I'm very happy to do that on the day if that tickles your fancy.
Amazing. So if anybody is listening to this and you got a little bit of time before the event, take a roll on the dice, and then see what Tim's writing's like. And then on the day, you at the event, you'll be able to come and find him and get signed copies of the rest of his stuff, that's exciting, isn't it? What a great prospect. Yeah. You said that earlier that you were writing and you were finishing off and editing and all of this, and is it the Broken Brotherhood? Is that right? So tell us a little bit more about how that's going and how that's shaping up.
Yeah, so Broken Brotherhood is the fourth and definitely final book in the Brotherhood of the Eagle. I really wanted I like a good fantasy series, but I think they need to be, for me, 3 or 4 books is kind of ideal, because it kind of it's not huge. It becomes a huge commitment, doesn't it, if you're going into like these epic 9-book series and all the rest of it. So yeah, 4th and final installment called Broken Brotherhood, and yeah, it's written in 2023. So I know how the story ends, which is quite a weird feeling. Then the Kickstarter basically annihilated me, if I'm perfectly honest. So I just didn't have just the mental energy, or frankly the time to edit and write and do what needed to be done with that book. Although I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I do think if you have a break from your writing and go back to it later, you always look at it afresh. And that's basically what happened. So lost about 4 months doing other stuff, and then I've got back into it the last couple. And I think it's basically almost ready. I think, again, by the time this goes out, I'm working on the ARC version of that at the moment. So I'm in line edits, going through, just tweaking things, making sure things are right. That version should be good enough for reviewers. And then it's going to basically sort of carry on that treadmill to work. Ideally, I'd like that book out before Hall of Bones comes out as the audiobook version. So I'm thinking probably, if things go well, October would be good for Broken Brother to come out, but we'll have to see. It depends very much whether I'm happy with sort of basically those second rounds of edits that need to happen.
Oh, that's really exciting. So for anybody who picks up your trilogy at the end of September, they're perfectly primed for the 4th final book of it when it's ready. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. I wish you all the best with the edits and everything, Tim, because it sounds really exciting, and it sounds like you've got an awful lot on your plate between now and when we'll actually get to see you at Shrewsbury. So yeah, wish you all of the best with these things as well, with Worldcon and roll of the dice and you're a busy guy.
I know. I'm starting to think to myself, might be doing a bit too much. It definitely felt like that with the Kickstarters. I think there's an element here where learning to pace yourself as well is quite important with all this stuff. But yeah, it feels like a lot of projects are sort of coming to fruition at the moment. So, like I say, I think to get to a finished, it was great to be a debut author, but I feel getting to finish my series for me is that's a really big. I mean, there's been a lot of big milestones the last year or so. It's been loads of stuff's happened, but that for me feels like probably the next big milestone, getting to a completed series and seeing, and hopefully, people enjoying the resolution of it all, because it's that's been the challenge, is how do you actually resolve all those things as we said, emotion we talked about earlier on. It's will people like it? It's quite, there's a bit of excitement, but also a bit of nerves that kind of comes with that as well.
Oh, I'm sure that you'll stick the landing, Tim, for sure. For everybody who is, obviously, we're going to catch up in Shrewsbury. You can come along to Shrewsbury on the 29th. But for anybody who wants to find out more about, your books and about you and wants to connect and everything before then, how can they find you on your socials?
Yeah, pretty easy to find. So Tim Hardie kind of gets you. If you put Tim Hardie and then author into your sort of platform of choice, I'll generally pop up. So I'm on as Tim Hardie author. That's my handle on Twitter /X. Facebook is Tim Hardie author public, and then I'm also on Blue Sky as well as Tim Hardie author. If that's all a bit quick, find me on my website, because that brings all the links and things together, and that's www.timhardieauthor.co.uk. So yeah, try and keep it simple and consistent.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much for joining me, Tim. All the best in the months ahead, and I will see you in Shrewsbury, if not before.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Thanks very much, Fraser.
Thanks.